comics?
Because they have no phone.
And now, the after show.
Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome back to what you were probably just listening to. But
Yeah.
more.
More after.
So I've been doing a little bit of googling actually while we were waiting to start this in between recording the episode, and China White's first appearance was in Green Arrow Year One, but apparently she was in the Arrow show, and Kelly Hu played her, the actress that
Who?
played Lady Deathstrike in X-Men 2. It's the same actress. So I guess she was on Arrow like multiple times in the early seasons, it looks like. So that's kind of cool.
Oh,
They
wow.
honestly, that show I think was at its best when they were. I mean, and it's going to sound like I'm beating a dead horse here, but when they were actually using his villains, when they had Count Vertigo, when they had China White, when they had Malcolm Merlin and people that are more specifically relevant to Green Arrow, it was like, oh yeah, this kind of feels like it's existing in that world. It's a little bit different, but
Well,
it kind of feels like they're at least playing with the toys in the toy box.
yeah, it's odd because the first couple seasons, like, it was still new, sort of, what they were
Mm-hmm.
doing. And so they wouldn't reference anything from a comic book, like, directly. It was either you would have a character who had that name who would sort of just be there as like a cameo. Like they had Solomon Grundy, but it wasn't really that character.
Oh, I forgot about Solomon Grundy.
So, they did a few things like that where they sort of had him and they made a reference to him, but they didn't really use him or anything. He was sort of in the background. And so they didn't really want to, I guess, tie it to anything else. Whereas nowadays, it's like, especially with the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and even so with Justice League and DC, now we're starting to reference everything in cinematics like we do with comic books. Like it in a comic book, you can have a character show up out of nowhere and it makes no sense in their timeline and it doesn't fit their story, but here they are in this story, and we kind of just go with it. But they didn't really do that in the show at the beginning, but then they started to open it up, and then we got the launch point for the Flash TV series, which actually happened in the Arrow show. So once we got to the point where it was like, okay, we can actually reference other things. We have other superhero TV shows out there. Everything is, wide open for us to use. That to me would have been the point to be like, we're going full Green Arrow here. And they even kind of do
Yeah,
that. Like they don't call him Arrow anymore. They call him Green Arrow. Like
yeah,
because the character or his superhero persona is just called Arrow at the beginning, which is why the show is called Arrow. But they change it to the Green Arrow. So this would have been the time to go into, make him more like the comic book character or use more of his villains. But it seems like the opposite happened. Like they used a few of them at the beginning, and then they had the whole Deathstroke thing. And the first two seasons were just like rock solid good.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
after that, it was just like, I don't know that it was necessarily a decline, but it didn't match those first two seasons, and it sort of, to me, felt like it stagnated until it was over. And I don't know what happened. Like we went with this whole love thing with Felicity, which I thought was weird, and when they first referenced it was like a joke or something, but it was actually true. And then we just kept
Hmm.
that going. Then we had to have some drama between her and that relationship, and will they, won't they, and can they stay together and can they not? And then they put the team together where it's like now he's the bat dad of, a bunch of little robins. And now he's got this team that he's trying to keep together. But then, of course, he doesn't know how to teach people. He just knows how to beat them up because that's what was done to him. So he does that to them and they don't learn. And,
Right.
they get upset at him and then they have to work together as a team. But then they split up. And it's just like, it's so much about the drama, which I guess that's why it's
Yeah.
on the CW. But
Yeah. I think partially it's just that's what that channel does when they started out as the WB and they had shows like Buffy and Angel, which probably ride that line of like drama and sci-fi fantasy a little bit more, where I'm like, yeah, I can kind of deal with this. But then they also had stuff like Dawson's Creek where it's like, yeah, it's very much just about that teen drama thing. And so that eventually became the CW, which for whatever reason became almost like the DC Comics network. And it's weird because I feel like Arrow started right in that pocket of Marvel is starting to do more faithful adaptations in movies. And the Dark Knight trilogy had ended. They were thinking about getting Man of Steel out there and kind of trying to start their own universe. But we were right in that sort of weird in between period where studios were going, they were sort of reevaluating how hard do we commit to the comic book elements. And I think the answer that we've seen definitely from Marvel is, if you're gonna do it, go all in on it.
Right.
Um, I mean, one of the reasons that I think, and whatever you think about the Aquaman movie, they commit hard to the fact that it is fantasy and it is superheroes in bright colors, and they go all in on all that stuff. I mean, we have sharks with laser beams and stuff. I mean, that's what you're gonna see if you pick up a comic book, is that kind of crazy stuff. And I think that, you know, whenever Arrow started, they were just right in that pocket of like, okay, maybe we need to lean into this a little bit harder, but we're still not sure if like the the masses, quote unquote, or Gen Pop is going to go for that. Because again, comic books were still, they were making big money in the movies, but they were still thought of as kind of like a niche thing a little bit. And Green Arrow has never been like one of DC's top sellers, I would say. I mean, he's basically one of those guys that he's probably the most solid like B-list character there is. I would say there's like, you talk about like the big six where you've got like Superman, Wonder Woman, the Flash, Batman, Green Lantern, and oh, who's the other one? I'm forgetting somebody. But anyway, oh, and Aquaman. Yeah, obviously, and Aquaman. Those are I can't believe I forgot Aquaman. Those are the big six. Their titles are pretty much always going to be around. I mean, even if Aquaman is on the chopping block every once in a while, he always comes back within a couple months. He's pretty much always got a book in publication. Green Arrow is the one that I would put like just barely under that group, as like he's super important to the DC universe, but he's never quite reached the popularity of those other characters. And so, yeah, I think that these showrunners like Mark Guggenheim and Andrew Kreisberg, they're going into it with doing a comic book adaptation, maybe, but maybe not entirely wanting to commit to it and trying to sell it on, well, hey, we can make this like Batman, you know.
Yeah, if it came out today, I think it would be on one of the TVMA networks, and it would be you'd probably have a lot more swearing and just like not swearing like just in general, but like the kind that if you took those words out, it wouldn't change anything about the show. Like where it's just
Right.
completely needless, and like Peacemaker, I think, is a really good example of everything that they do in that show that's either inappropriate or offensive or whatever. It works for that show. It's a part of that show. If you took those things
Yeah,
out, it would not be the same.
I agree.
Whereas a show like Titans, I feel like if you took all the swearing out of Titans, it would be exactly the same show. Nothing would change. But you've got everybody from Barbara Gordon to Nightwing to you know, anyone who has screen time has to drop an F bomb at least, once a season or something. But it's like, why is this necessary? It doesn't enhance the story. It doesn't fit the story. It's just something to give it, a little more color because we got to earn that TVMA rating. So
Right.
I feel like Arrow, like they started off trying to be inspired from the comics. And then after that phase was over, it's like, okay, it's its own show now. We're going to do whatever we want within the show and not really worry about the comics. And so, since we've started off with this sort of dark and gritty look, let's keep going and make it similar. I don't know if the intent was to make it similar to Batman or not, but that was kind of the result, especially with, again, I joke about the Bat family, but that's really what it felt like to me. Is like, why is
Yeah.
he training these people and he's still the same, like, and you watch him make the same mistakes over and over of like, oh, I don't trust anybody. Oh, I need to do this on my own. Oh, I'm gonna brood because something went wrong and it's all my fault. And don't get me wrong, like I love the show, but
Yeah.
these kind of things just ruin it for me in these moments because it's like we never learn from these mistakes and we lean into the heavy I don't know, the heavy drama aspect so much that it's like, hey, when we're doing the comic book scenes, those are great. When we're doing the drama scenes, fast forward. That's what
I
it felt like to me.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think the things early on that they really nailed on the show are the first two seasons specifically. I remember I was watching a couple of other shows that had action elements in them at the time, and you could tell that they spent money on fight choreography on Arrow.
Yeah.
I mean, it was good and it looked good and it was shot well. And even if it was in darkness, a lot of times it seemed like it was very well thought out and well choreographed. Whereas I think Continuum was on at the same time, that sci-fi show that we like so much, and the writing on that show was excellent. But the anytime they had a fight scene, I was just like, ugh, this isn't like I'm not buying it. You know, it doesn't look real. So it was interesting the things that they choose to focus on. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's hard though from a film standpoint to portray that character, because how many ways can you frame a shot where you are just it's a guy shooting an arrow, you know? I guess at a certain point you have to get really creative to make that look energetic and all of that stuff. And I'm sure a lot of it was sped up, but the action stuff I felt like always was pretty solid, if
Yeah,
not
for sure.
great. And there were I think one of the later seasons, the only later season that really connected with me, I think was season 5 where they did Prometheus, because I view him as he is a JLA villain. I think his first appearance was in the Grant Morrison run in the 90s, and he basically got on the Watchtower, portrayed himself to be a fan, and then single handedly took down the whole team. And so he is a huge threat. But I do also kind of view him as part of Green Arrow's, uh, if not his rogues, just part of his history, because that's one of the people that Ollie does kill in the comic books. So having him on the show, I was like, oh, okay, we're getting to kind of elements that are relevant to Oliver Queen specifically. And whenever they did that, I felt like that was when it was like, oh, this is actually kind of, this works. But I mean, even early on in season 2, the first Batman element that I can remember them bringing in is, I know they brought Huntress in, and they did like the whole Helena Bertinelli
Oh
story
yeah.
about her family being killed by the mob and all that stuff, and they made her a love interest for Ollie and all of that. And I really like the actress that played her, and I really like seeing a live action version of her. But it was, again, just another thing that was like, well, this is a Batman centric character, and you've just inserted him in, or inserted her into this other world. And it just, to me, it shows that the filmmakers don't have confidence in the material that they're adapting. So I don't know.
Well, and like the changes to the character, I mean, this is not on par with, things like X-Men Wolverine Origins, which I'm going to bring up as much as I can because
Oh
don't
no.
don't watch it if you don't know who Deadpool is. But this isn't that bad, but there are a lot of things like that where the CW version, again, he's the dark and broody type, and it's about the drama versus being the fun-loving, quippy. He doesn't use trick arrows in the show and things like that. Like it, they change. Changing characters is one thing, but I felt like they changed a lot of things that were fundamentally important to his character and like caring about the little guy and kind of being a little more lighthearted. Like they missed the mark on
Yeah.
those kinds of story elements. But again, I don't want to hate on the show too much because I really like what it did for superhero TV in general. And I also, I
Oh
really
yeah.
like the portrayals of a lot of the that the actors did of the characters, close to the comics or not, whatever they did with them, they did a good job with them. Like all the acting was good, the choreography was good, the costume, I think in the first one was intended to be a little basic, but they made some changes as the years went on to make it more fit the Oliver Queen version that was there.
Right.
But they also brought a lot of, I think, new elements to it as well that sort of helped that character and helped Green Arrow just kind of be more well-rounded as well. So there are a lot of positives to it. And I think the reason that we rag on it so much is that it was good, but we just, if you just tweak a couple things here and there, it could have been so much better in our opinion,
Yeah,
because
it was so close. There, I mean, they really teased the Dinah Lance or Laurel Lance, whichever
yeah.
name you prefer. They really teased that relationship early on too, which very much becomes an important part of the Green Arrow comics. He and Black Canary eventually get married in the comics, and they're very much in love, and so that seemed like something that they were going to go for, and then they kind of veered off into you know somewhere else, and we're like, no, he likes Felicity. Which Felicity is a supporting character in Firestorm's comics, and I'm not really sure how she ended up on Arrow, but yeah,
Well,
for whatever reason they used that character, and they wanted to connect those two characters. I don't know if the fans had a lot to do with that, because there seemed to be a lot of fan shipping going on between
yeah.
Oliver and Felicity, and I don't know if the writers were just like, well, let's just write to what the fans want. But for me, a really big missed opportunity was not pairing him off with Black Canary, because I really felt like that's where they should have
Well, and maybe it was
taken
like
that.
because it was the obvious choice, they didn't want to go there. But
Yeah.
it's so contradictory, because sometimes they do something completely different, but then sometimes they do something that's like almost a mirror image, but they tweak it for the show. And I was looking for this and I found it. So the season 3 mid-season finale on the Arrow TV show, Oliver faces Ra's al Ghul to a sword fight to the death on top of a mountain.
Oh
The battle
yeah.
leaves Oliver with a sword wound in the chest and kicked off a mountain, where he has to recover from that in the next
Mm-hmm.
part of the season. Well, that's actually from Batman number 244, where Batman has to he challenges Ra's al Ghul to a sword fight, and there's actually like a cover image online of that, where there's Ra's al Ghul and he's got the sword, and they have their shirts off, but Batman still has his cowl on, and it's like,
Right.
wow, if you replaced Batman here with Stephen Amell from the TV show, like that would be a cover for the
Yeah.
TV show. But why? Like, hey, this is cool and nobody's done it on TV. I really like the story, but hey, let's take it out of Batman and make our Oliver Queen do this instead of him. Like, maybe they were just trying to like play homage to a cool story but do it with a different character. I don't know, but it just seemed like the more that they did that, the more that they transformed Oliver Queen into Bruce Wayne, and that's
Yeah.
not who he is.
Yeah. I was gonna say that I remember them doing that, and what I would have said about that is, if they were gonna do it, they need to take it somewhere different than where the comics go. So maybe Oliver comes out of that and he goes, you know what? Maybe I will learn to do some necessary killing and some, whatever. Maybe he embraces the League of Shadows and becomes their leader for like a season or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. I mean, maybe to me, if you're gonna do that and adapt that Batman story, but put Oliver Queen into it, at least give it a different outcome that's somehow informed by who his character is on that show. And I think they could have made it work in that way, but because it's a superhero show and we have to sort of get back to the status quo, it just kind of it went back to just the same old very quickly. I think that's the season that Katana was in, though, and I actually really like the actress that they had playing her. All he and her do team up in Jeff Lemire's run in New 52 during an arc called the Outsiders War, and that stuff was really good. So she is somebody that shows up in Green Arrow's book, but she's also been on a team called the Outsiders that Batman leads. So there you
Of
go.
course.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the killing thing, and this version of the Green Arrow starts off just like liberally killing everybody who
Yeah.
is, touched by a bad guy or is in their compound or whatever. And so partly through this story that we just talked about, but also through the events of the next couple seasons, and Felicity, like he rescinds that, and like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be killing so much, and then he goes to where he's just not going to kill anybody, and so he starts wounding people, which is still kind of brutal, but at least he's not killing them. But then it turns into like Felicity's almost begging him. I forget who it was, if it was Prometheus or somebody, but it was like, wow, this bad guy is so bad that we're not going to get rid of him any other way. You're going to have to kill him. And
Yeah.
Oliver's like, well, no, I don't do that anymore. And it just seems like an element to fuel the drama rather than an actual struggle that the character is going through. And so what you mentioned, like, maybe he gets involved with the League of Shadows, and maybe he realizes, hey, this killing thing works, or maybe assassination is better rather than, killing all the guards because they're just doing their jobs, or, you don't
Well,
know
just
who's
take
dirty
it.
or not, or something.
Yeah, just take it somewhere different. If you're gonna do that story, but put Oliver Queen into it, take it somewhere different.
Right.
And Oliver, even in the comic books, has shown that he will occasionally kill a bad guy. Again, it's not his normal MO. He doesn't go there as his first option, but I would say he probably has a higher kill count than Batman because he will occasionally be pushed into taking that step. And that's interesting because he is what I would consider to be a much lighter character than Batman, but I also think he has sort of a pragmatism about him, or a uh, almost like a common sense that comes from his sort of identifying with the common man and all that. And yeah, again, I know he's not the common man; he's a billionaire, but I think there, yeah, he kind of has that pragmatism to his character where he can be pushed into a situation where he realizes, yikes, maybe this is the best option. I mean, and it's not, it's a complicated discussion to have because police officers, in certain circumstances have the right to shoot people if their life is being threatened, or if those people are actively threatening to kill other people, or something like that. So it's I think the area where it becomes more morally gray is because comic books used to be for kids. And so you didn't, when they were for kids, like, well, yeah, you can't have these guys in these bright
Oh,
costumes
I
going
saw
out
their
there.
parachutes. They're okay.
Yeah, killing bag exactly. Yeah. But I do think it's an interesting discussion to have, and I do think that it's one that I don't know that Ollie necessarily struggles with it that much in the comic books. I just see it as something that, like, yeah, he will occasionally take that measure if he feels it's absolutely necessary and there's no other option.
Right. He's not a
So,
sociopath. Like he's not
right,
doing this from some like deep-seated like, hey, I'm crazy, and the only way to, get rid of my crazy is to put on this hood and go out and shoot people. Like that's that's not who Oliver Queen is, and that's not who the Green Arrow is. He's not a villain from Gotham. Like
right,
he's not Batman. He is somebody who's lived a spoiled life and is now using that for good. So he's not going to just go out there and be like, well, I need to stop this guy. I'll just, shoot anybody in the head who comes near me. I mean, obviously, like if his life is threatened, or, he has no choice, or he's going to do what he has to do to survive and to take down, whoever is doing the oppressing. But he's not just going to go out there and be like, look, there's a guard. Psh, let me assassinate him from the bushes.
right. Yeah, I would agree with that. So I don't know. I mean, the show is one of those things where it's Katie actually watched it at one point. She was watching the first couple seasons and she was like, so is it just Batman? I mean, that's what she said to me. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Kind
I
of.
in my mind, I'm kind of like digging for those Green Arrow elements. And so whenever they do them, I'm able to pull it out and enjoy that part of it and go, oh yeah, he's a separate character. But if you're gonna reduce Oliver Queen down to his core, I think the original inception of the character was very much like he's kind of like Batman, but without the angst and the anger. I mean, I'm pretty sure his earliest appearances, he's, you know, jumping through windows with Roy Harper and shooting boxing gloves at people and stuff. And he's got all the gadgets and the billionaire stuff, but he doesn't have all the anger and the rage.
Right.
And
Because he's not motivated by what happened to
right,
his parents.
right. So I think that's where they started him, but I think that he's developed into a very different person where the similarities to Batman are really surface level, and so it's a shame that they played that up so much in the show, because I think that is kind of just a misunderstanding of who Oliver Queen is.
That was a criticism that people had of Spider-Man after the events of Superior Spider-Man, where, uh, without going into too much detail, essentially what happens is Peter Parker is left with, he has his own corporation and he has a lot of money. And so he starts making gadgets, and that's where you get like the spider bots and things like that happening. And so this is in his solo series. And the major criticism was, well, you've basically taken, Peter Parker, who's always the poor kid, and you've made him into the rich guy, billionaire philanthropist who has all these gadgets, and so now he's just Iron Man. That's just it. He's Iron Man. But the thing was,
Yeah,
like, I didn't buy into that criticism because he was still, the character was still the same. He still did all
right.
the Spider-Man things that he did, and yeah, he used some additional gadgets, and it made for some really cool gameplay elements in the Marvel Spider-Man PlayStation game, like using the spider bots to disarm bombs and things like that. That game relied too much on gadgets. Maybe he was Iron Man there, but I I got off on a tangent. Sorry, but
No,
anyway,
that's okay.
but he was still, the character was still the same. It's just what was happening around him was different. Like you put him in this, now he's a business CEO, but he was dodging meetings all the time because he's not the kind of character to show up to with a suit and a tie to a meeting and be like, oh yes, well, I'll have some coffee, and what's on the agenda today. He's not serious. Even when he's older, he's not serious enough to
Yeah,
lead a business meeting. Whereas you take Bruce Wayne, like that's, he's got the personas where he can do one or the other. Like, okay, I'm Batman, I'm doing research, everything's dark, there are bats nearby, and then he's like, hey, I'm Bruce Wayne. What's on the agenda for Wayne Enterprises? Well, we really need
right.
to do this and do that, and same thing with Tony Stark. Like they have those sides of their personality, but you can have something similar to another character without actually being that same character. Like again,
Right.
Hawkeye and Green Arrow, like they both use a bow and arrow to shoot their enemies, but they're entirely different people.
Yeah, they do feel very different. Especially the Matt Fraction version of Hawkeye feels very much like his own character and his own person.
Well, even the
And
MCU version as
I don't
well.
yeah, I mean I don't it's interesting because that's another one where I think that the similarities are really easy to draw, to be like, oh, they're both sort of Robin Hood inspired, steal from the rich and give to the poor, kind of Archer guys. But I think that that's really just a surface level read of it. And I think if you read comics, they feel different enough that you can probably enjoy both. Or, pick one that you're like, oh, I like this one better. But yeah, I
Right.
think I don't know that Hawkeye has had as successful of like a solo run. It's really just a few creators out there like Fraction that we mentioned earlier that really kind of nailed him down and was like, this is, I'm writing the definitive Hawkeye now, basically. But I view him much more as a supporting team player. At least that's where I usually see him in comic books. Whereas Oliver Queen, I view him more as a solo hero that occasionally will be on a team. So
Right. Yeah.
I almost think that's reversed with Clint Barton. I don't know.
If you have Barton living in the Avengers Tower and he has a whole bunch of money and he's able to buy, just about whatever he wants, he's not going to become Oliver Queen just because he has a bunch of money. Like he's still going to be
Right,
Clint Barton. He's probably
right.
going to not spend it very well and have no idea what to do with it, and probably still eat, 3-day-old pizza out of a box without heating it up, because
Yeah,
that's just who he is, and
Oliver
these
Queen's
things aren't
got a
going to
little
change
more
him.
class,
Yeah.
doesn't he? Than
Oliver at least knows how to party. He doesn't
than
really do
Clint
that
Barton.
anymore, but
No,
he's had parties and rich playboy parties in his day, I
no,
guess.
it's funny. Yeah. Well, was there anything else you wanted to say about the show versus the comics, or?
I feel like we talked about that too much. Like, should we talk about this actual like Green Arrow year one at any point in our after show?
Well, I mean, I think we covered the story really well. The interesting thing to me, I think, was that they actually killed Oliver's parents prior to the story. So Moira and Robert were dead.
Oh, I missed
And
that. I didn't think about that.
yeah, there it was like one line where Hackett was like, "Well, since your parents died, da 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 da," and that was a change that I wasn't, or a just a story beat that I wasn't particularly fond of. But that's mainly because I love Emiko Queen or Emiko Queen, which however it's pronounced. Uh, on or in the comic books, who's Oliver's younger half sister. Basically, Robert Queen, Robert's father, has a daughter with Shadow, who's sort of an assassin that he meets, and that daughter is Oliver's younger sister, and she becomes Red Arrow. So and she's not really a sidekick. She's really it's almost like Hawkeye, Kate Bishop Hawkeye, where Red Arrow really is kind of just her own hero. I wouldn't really describe her as Green Arrow's sidekick because she doesn't tag along with him the way Roy Harper does, either as Speedy or as Arsenal. But she's more of just like a Teen Titan and a solo hero, and like she'll come help out Oliver and stuff. But she is a great, great character. So I don't like his parents just being flat dead before the story even begins, because that doesn't give us the option to bring those elements in. So that was the only thing in year one that I thought like, I don't know. I plus the on the Arrow show, the actress that plays Moira Queen is like one of the best actors on the show, Susanna Thompson. So she's just really fun to watch. She chews up all the scenery and really has this sort of commanding presence. And I mean, no surprise, she played the Board Queen on Star Trek Voyager, and several other Star Trek roles that were in heavy makeup. So she's sort of a veteran, but yeah, she was a really great character, and they actually brought Moira Queen into the comics as an antagonist during the Rebirth era as well. So yeah, I don't know. I think I would rather at least there be some more story elements with the parents, but that's really a big nitpick, honestly. And I mean, this being written in 2007 before any of that stuff had been thought of, I don't think that's really something I can legitimately gripe about. It's just hindsight being 2020, I would rather them, play with those additional story elements.
Yeah,
So
now that you mentioned Emiko, that reminded me, or however, whichever the correct pronunciation is, whether
I
you watch the
don't
show
know.
or whatever. But
Yeah.
anyway, they I don't know if like maybe it was because of the Batman criticisms or what, but the show started throwing in these elements and characters later. Like they have Dinah Drake as a separate character who actually has the sonic powers
Oh,
like
wow.
genetically, and it's weird because like so Dinah Drake is actually what Laurel Lance's mother,
Mm-hmm.
and she was the original
Yeah, in
Black
the
Canary.
comics, yeah. Yeah,
So
and then in New 52, she was Black Canary was Dinah Drake, but then she got married to Kurt Lance and
mhm.
changed her name to Dinah Lance. And then when that ended, she was still Dinah Lance. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
they actually like combined both of those characters into one for the
Well,
New 52.
and that's what it seemed like they were doing in the Arrow show is you have Laurel Lance, who her name is actually Dinah Laurel Lance, but
Right.
then they have Dinah Drake later, and she's a separate character, and she's definitely not a love interest for Oliver, but she's another character. And then the same thing with Emiko, like she just kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's like this retcon of, oh, Robert Queen wasn't exactly, or no, it wasn't Robert, it was Moira.
Oh.
She and what's his face? Prometheus had a love child, and that was,
What?
or was it them, or who was it? Now I don't remember.
Oh my
It,
gosh.
it gets really complicated because like so his sister is like his half sister. I think that was Tommy, or not Tommy. Merlin was
Oh yeah,
the
yeah.
so Merlin was the father, and Moira was the mother of his sister. But then where did Emiko? I think Emiko was the love child of Robert and somebody who I think
Yeah,
was in the
Thea's
Blades or
Thea's
something.
father was Malcolm, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Which
yeah.
Thea was actually a thinly veiled version of Mia Dearden, who is a different character in the Arrow comics, Green Arrow comics. So that again, she was kind of just a like slightly modified version of a different existing character. So yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
so
know.
there
It was very much a mess.
there was a lot of that going on in the later seasons, and it was weird because it's like, okay, you're throwing these Green Arrow elements in here to, well, we have Green Arrow elements and we have Batman elements, and we kind of draw from
Right.
everywhere. But the main story beats are still pretty well Batman things, and the main theme is still drama. So I don't know, it
Right.
it didn't necessarily work for me.
Yeah, I think when I really started to go like this is just garbage was after the after like season 5 they had him go back and forth on his no kill rule like 3 times and had him go back and forth on the like I'm dating Felicity, I'm not dating Felicity, I don't want to put her in danger, I'm going to tell my friends everything, no, I'm going to protect them and not tell them everything. It was just like they were repeating story beats ad nauseum.
Yeah.
And I recognize that sometimes comic books do that because of changing writers and people not doing the research, but it felt somehow worse on this TV show. And I just got tired of the sort of like cyclical nature of where it's like the character's not changing, they're just like spinning his wheels basically. But he's never getting out of the parking lot. So I don't know, it just felt like at a certain point they were, I don't know if it's that they ran out of ideas or if they were just like we don't know how to balance the tone that we've created of this show with the actual comic book elements. I don't know what that was, but yeah, it is interesting though, because I do feel like year one is a story that very much inspired the tone of that show, but I feel like they missed all the character beats about him caring about the downtrodden and where he would eventually end up after this story, which is he's going to be making some jokes while he's taking down bad guys and feel like he's not really taking it that seriously. And yeah, I don't know, it feels like they just read this one isolated story but they didn't take really any of the rest of his history into account. So
Yeah. So
yeah.
what do you know what is the next like major storyline after Green Arrow year 1? Like what happens next? 'Cause
um I don't, because this period in comics at DC, I'm specifically very unfamiliar with. Because we're basically, this is 2007. So we're like, what, like 4 years before the hard reboot. Um, my understanding is that almost all of the books were really well written at the time, but nobody was buying them, which is
oh,
why, eventually it led to them doing a line wide reboot because they were like, we've got to get some new readers in here. And yeah, so I don't really know what happens right after this point. I mean, I guess you could look on DC Universe Infinite, you or anybody else, and see, what was going on in Green Arrow at the time. But yeah, I'm sadly I'm pretty ignorant of what was going on in the universe at large at this point. So
yeah.
I think, let's see, 2007 Final Crisis would that have ended yet or started? I don't know. That would have that event book would have been either around this time or within like a couple of years of it, I think. But I don't. That's basically Darkseid gets the anti-life equation and he actually succeeds in taking over the Earth, and then
Oh,
Batman
fun.
gets killed and he has to fight his way back through time, and it's a whole thing. Yeah, but
All right. Well, if you know the answer, then let us know in
yeah,
the comment section, and we
I
will.
think Nate is going to let us know.
Yeah,
I think
probably.
I think he'll know, because if it even marginally involves like Roy Harper or Emiko or any of those characters that have been Titans, he'll know the answer. So he can tell us.
All right. Well, that is all I've got, unless you have anything else.
No, I think I'm good, man. This was good. This went long. Hopefully
Yeah.
it's enjoyable for everybody out there. And, just thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah, thank you. We're excited to start season 2 and see where it goes. We're gonna
Season 2.
Yeah, we're gonna line up some of our reviews with some of the big theatrical and miniseries releases this year, so that should be fun. Give you a little background information before the series
Yes.
come out, and just kind of prepare you, I guess, for these characters and what they're like in the comics, and then we can maybe do some featurettes here and there to talk about, comparison contrast between comics and the shows, because that's fun.
Moon Knight and She-Hulk, baby.
Oh yeah.
That's what it's all about.
All right. Well, until next time, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you later.
Catch you later.
We like
Comics.
because they